Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Church of Manchester by the Sea for this morning's live streamed worship celebration. We welcome those of you from the First Parish Church community, as well as the many of you who we know have been watching both in person and after the fact on the video recordings on our website and on YouTube. One quick note before we begin. Rebecca Shrimpton was scheduled to be with us to sing this morning again, but she has a bit of a sore throat and wisely determined that the place where she belonged this morning was at home. She has no other symptoms, wanted to make sure that the folks in our First Parish Church community knew that, and we expect to have her back with us again next Sunday. But we are pleased to once again have Dr. Herman Weiss leading us musically along with Paul Knox. So with that, I invite you to prepare your hearts, minds, and bodies and spirits to worship together as a community of God's people, both near and far, with a time of music meditation. Something bright to get us started with this morning during this difficult time. Thank you, Herman. I invite you now to join us in our opening prayer, which is printed in the online bulletin that you hopefully have received. Holy One, we are not together in person, but we are not alone. You are with us, and we are with each other in mind, heart, and spirit. In this time that is so strange in so many ways, one thing remains the same. You have given us everything we need to move through these days of difficulty, illness, isolation, and see the other side. You have given us enormous material resources. You have given us science. You have given us medical expertise. You have given us caregivers, and you have given us each other. With your presence and spirit and with each other, we may struggle, but we will not be overcome. We may be uncertain and anxious, but we will not be driven to hopelessness and despair. We may be slowed down, but we will not be stopped. With you and each other, we will do what we can to carry out your call to bring hope and healing where, when, and however we can. The same way that Jesus did. And so we say together now the words he gave us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen. So now, as we come to our community's time of prayer, I invite you to share any joys or concerns that you wish with whoever you might be with, and then also share those with our God in the silence of your hearts and minds. For the second week in a row, as I was getting ready to prepare my own pastoral prayer, I received one. Someone emailed me one from another source that was a lot better than anything I had in mind. So we're going to do that again today. This prayer comes from Cameron Bellum, and it's called Prayer for a Pandemic. So let us pray. Oh God, may we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those who are most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have had to cancel our trips remember those who have no safe place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. And as fear grips our country, O God, let us choose love. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, let us find ways to be the loving embrace of God to our neighbors, to all. to share these words from Mark's Gospel. And a large crowd followed him, pressed in on Jesus. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. She was no better. Instead, she had grown worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" Jesus looked all around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. So go in peace and be healed." Why did she go back? Why did she go back? It had been 12 long years. 12 long years of existential quarantine. Because it hadn't been about just the physical ramifications of her illness. There had been financial and emotional and social and spiritual ramifications as well. She had spent every last dollar on medical care, but hadn't gotten any better. And because of the nature of her disease, even though she wasn't contagious, she was considered to be ritually unclean according to ancient Jewish religious law, which meant that she was disqualified from participating in the spiritual life of her community. It meant that she was disqualified from being able to participate in the rituals and the worship services and the celebrations associated with her faith. And if that wasn't enough, in those days, in that time and place, the religious law and the civil law were one and the same. And so her illness also made her a social outcast. It had left her in a state of enforced social distancing well before that term became a regular part of our vocabulary these days. But even so, there she was anyway, doing her best to stay lost in the crowd, go unnoticed by anyone. But she had heard about him, heard about the same person that everybody else in the crowd that day was there to see, this wandering rabbi, teacher named Jesus. She'd heard that he had a way with people like her, that he wasn't afraid to be seen with her in her condition, that he saw her as a real person, as a human being unlike everyone else had for the last 12 years. She had hoped that he might be able to bring some measure of hope and healing into her life. That he might see her as an equally loved and valued daughter of God. And well, if he could, then maybe others would learn to as well. And she could be removed. She could leave that existential quarantine after all those years. But face-to-face wasn't an option. See, again, in that time and place, women just didn't go up directly to rabbis, to teachers like Jesus. Especially not women like her. But maybe, just maybe, she thought, if she could somehow just touch him without him seeing or noticing her, or even not touch him, just touch his clothes, just even for an instant. It only took an instant, just a moment for her to make her way to Jesus, and reach out and just quickly brush her hand against his cloak. And then she was on her way again. But in a way, different. Almost immediately, she felt different. She felt lighter, less burdened for the first time in 12 years. Like more of a real person. A genuine human being. Healed somehow. Made whole again, or at least on the way there. But as she made her way, as she started to make her way away from Jesus, she began to pick up pieces of a conversation going on behind her. Jesus asking his closest followers something about who had touched him, and one of the disciples answering back something along the lines of, "Are you serious? We're in a crowd. It could have been anybody who touched you." Back and forth, they continued to go like that as she moved farther and farther away, until something stopped, then turned her around, and then led her right back to Jesus. Only this time, face to face. The woman walks up to Jesus, looks him in the eyes, and then falls to the ground and says, "I did. I'm the one you're asking about." And then she tells him why. She tells him everything about those 12 long years of existential quarantine. The writer of Mark's gospel tells us she goes back in fear and trembling. Now that word fear in the Greek that the Gospels were originally written in, as well as the Hebrew that the Old Testament was originally written in, far more often than not means awe. And we could understand that. her feeling a sense of awe in what was going on. But even if that word fear means the way we understand that word now, that would have been just as understandable. She had no idea how Jesus would react. He could very well have been angry with her, chosen to shame her publicly, sent her right back into existential quarantine. But instead, he smiles and says, "Daughter." He calls her daughter. In that time, a term that wasn't just about family. It was also a term that implied recognition, acceptance, inclusion of someone. Daughter. It had been so long since anybody had called her daughter. Daughter, Jesus says to her, "Your faith has made you well." Faith, a word which again in the Greek the Gospels were written in, means trust. Your trust has made you well. Your trust in the power of God. Trust in the power of God working through Jesus. The power of compassion and kindness and empathy and mercy and inclusion and connection to heal us, to make us whole again, or at least on the way there. But still, why go back? Why did she go back? She didn't have to. Jesus didn't know who she was, hadn't seen her. She had gotten what she wanted. She could have so easily just kept on walking, gone back to being lost in the crowd, and gone on her way. Why go back? Maybe because she walked away, she realized something, recognized something. That by just walking away, she would be treating Jesus no better, the very same way as everyone else had treated her for the last 12 years. Like an object. Not a real person. Not a real human being. Treating him as if his value and worth were simply in what she could get from him or take from him. Treating him as social and business researchers refer to it in transactional terms instead of relational terms. As social and business researchers describe them, transactional interactions are rooted in the short term, in the immediate. They are not meant to be overly personal. They are about getting as much gain from the other party as we can. Relational interactions, on the other hand, are rooted in the long term. They are rooted in a sense of commitment, interconnectedness, interdependence. They are about mutual gain. In times of crisis, there are countless decisions that need to be made. Decisions in multiple areas: individual, family, community, state, nation, worldwide. Countless decisions that need to be made. Like right now. But I wonder if there is perhaps no more important decision that needs to be made in a time of crisis than how we will make all those other decisions. Whether we will make all those other decisions on transactional or relational terms. Will we make the decisions that need to be made purely in regard to the short term, as impersonal as possible, with the idea of just getting as much for ourselves as we can? We've seen plenty of that already in this time of crisis. People hoarding things like toilet paper and wipes, and worse, medical face masks. The price gouging of things like hand sanitizer. Physicians, medical personnel hoarding certain medications or writing prescriptions for family and friends for medications that have not been proven to work against this virus, but are proven to work against other medical conditions, thereby leaving people who suffer from those conditions at risk of not having the medication they need. Conditions, for instance, like lupus. And then, of course, the suggestion by some that elderly people be willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the economy. Now look, the economy matters. I get that. It does matter. It is important. But for one thing, we have no idea whether the sacrificing of the elderly will make any long-term effect on what's coming down the road economically, especially considering no population is completely immune from this virus. But then the other thing, and really the more important thing, I think anyway, is that really how we want to determine the worth and value of a human life in our society? Because Jesus sure doesn't. And the God Jesus embodies sure doesn't either. Instead, the God Jesus embodies calls us to reflect on and recognize and respond on the basis of the reality of our interconnectedness and interdependence. As Michael Bauer, professor of moral philosophy at Fordham, said recently, it is an illusion to think that we are not interconnected and interdependent in this time, because we always have been. He says, the chain of causality has always been there. We just need now more than ever to reflect on and recognize it. Why did she go back? She went back because she reflected on to that interdependence. To the fact that we are called by Jesus, we are called by God to be relational, far more than transactional. And if we do that, we will see the other side. Not without struggle, not without loss, not without suffering, but we will see ourselves to the other side of this together. If she could reflect on and recognize and respond to that interconnectedness, that interdependence in her time of crisis, then so can we, my friends. So can we. I'd like to thank you for joining us again this morning, wherever you are, for this time of celebration, of recognition, remembrance of God's presence and power and goodness and challenge and call for our lives. And so now let us go back out into this world in this time of crisis, doing what so many of us have already been doing, following the example of so many others in terms of reflecting on and recognizing and responding to this crisis in relational terms. Let us go out into this time of crisis and continue to make and bring meals to those in need, donate money to all of the causes that are so valiant, doing what needs to be done in this time, and also recognizing and being grateful and supporting in any way we can the people in the medical community who fully understand our interconnectedness in our interdependence and are responding to that because it is the right thing to do, because it is what our God calls us to do. And for that challenge, for the opportunity to meet that challenge, we say thanks be to God. Amen. Blessings.